So the other thing is if you feel like on June 15th, your erg isn't recruitable, okay, you are a sophomore, you have 2 more years of training. And if you are diligent and you train well for 2 years, there's no way you don't get faster. So, and good college coaches know that and like understand what to look for there, you know? So that's something else to keep in mind. Like, we understand this is a training sport. Training takes time. Results lag on training. And like, we know that. So don't be discouraged on June 15th if you feel that, you get an email back from a program and they say, hey, we're looking under 7:30 and you're 7:45. Okay, you could be 7:30 in 6 months.
All right, Delaney, now you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, let's do it. So, for everyone listening, we have longtime guest, multiple-time guest, Delaney McGuire, coach at Eastern Michigan University for the women's rowing program. Delaney's been on, 5, 6, 7 times up to this point. Again, someone I always love having on because we just have so much fun talking coaching. And today we're going to dive into just a little bit of an update on the season. It's April, hard to believe. Colder April than probably many people expect, but racing is live. Racing is happening. So we're going to hear from Delaney a little bit about what's going on with their season. We're also going to dive into a little recruiting because I think that's a very important topic for a lot of athletes at this stage, as they just continue to investigate where should I be in the recruiting process, recruit or reaching out to coaches and things like that. We're overdue for a little conversation on that front. And then at the end, diving into our favorite topic, which is training, and diving into whatever, again, 2 things or something that we are both very passionate about, training and racing and all the fun stuff that comes with that. So Delaney, without further ado, let's jump in. Give us the update. It's April. You're telling me before the show it was it's a little bit of a colder day out there in Michigan today. Same thing here in Philly. It seems like spring is really kind of delaying its feeling, right? That feeling of spring weather and warm rows and stuff like that. But give us an update. You've had racing already happening. You have a little bit of a break now before your next race. You guys are training, working hard. Give us the scoop. How are things going? What's the goal over the next 2 months? And let's start there.
Yeah, it was brutally cold here this morning. So like real feel of 7. So we opted for the ergs this morning, which I know it was disappointing for all of us. I think we're all just trying to we want to see that turn in the weather. So hopefully we're getting through it here. But we are 2 weeks into racing. So we raced the Doc Hosey Regatta in Camden 2 weeks ago. And then this past Saturday, we had Michigan State over to our lake for a little duel. So 2 very different weekends of racing. So with Doc Hosey, we had the heats and finals, and we had a kind of a mixed bag of competition between a couple top 15 teams and then a lot of mid-majors, some people from our conference. So racing has been going pretty well. We're pretty happy with where we're at right now, especially our top 8 is moving much better than we've seen it move over the last couple of years. We're seeing the training that we've done over the winter is definitely there fitness wise. So I think what we're really hoping for right now is just more water time to kind of refine what we're doing. I think that's where we're going to see the biggest pickup in speed over the next couple of weeks. We got on the water, I guess the week before Doc Hosey, about halfway through that week. But we've had a few missed days for wind. Last week was really sporadic. I think we had 2 days where we erged because it was too windy. We had 1 day where we tried to get out, but we got out and, it chopped up within 30 minutes. So we came back in and finished on land. So we're just kind of hoping to string together some days here over the next 2.5 weeks. We don't have any racing again until April 26th. We're hosting the Ford Lake Cup on our lake. So that'll be our first big regatta with our home course fully installed. So that'll be fun. And we're having a bunch of our future conference opponents out, and some other really nice competition mid-major wise. So we're excited for that. And that's sort of what we want to, sharpen ourselves up for and use these next 2 weeks without any racing to really dial in on what we're doing on the water. But yeah, I mean, it's been great. The team's great. We have a really good group of athletes, great mindset and attitude. So I think we're all just excited, to build some momentum over this next month or so.
And you mentioned the race course and what you guys have. You're rattling them off a little bit before we started recruiting. But you have a number of crews coming out there. You guys are hosting a race. At the end of the month, so you got some time to train. But like, describe. I think it's a great opportunity because we might as well just shed some light on Eastern Michigan and what you guys have cooking out there. Like, there's a lot of kind of great stuff that's coming down the pike in terms of just your university and the race course and stuff like that. Like, with just, if you can, like, describe the environment, and the scene of Michigan college rowing, and meaning like the venue that you guys are putting together, the race course, the hosting of East, teams out east, right? You said, some of the programs out here in Philly and PA and Northeast and stuff like that are coming out to race with you guys. Just give a little summary on just the environment that is, Midwest, right? Kind of not your normal Northeast kind of race courses and so on and so forth, right? Like, a little bit of a different landscape for the teams and coaches out there who may be thinking about, ooh, like, that'd be fun to go out and do a race in Michigan. Never thought about that. Describe that if you don't mind.
Yeah. I think when I first moved out here, it's almost been 8 or 9 years since I initially moved out here. I remember Kemp telling me about, it was like a pipe dream at that point of like, yeah, we have a really great body of water to have a race course. I mean, it's wide. We can fit 8 lanes. We can go up to 12 lanes. Right now we have 8 lanes, but like if we wanted to, we could expand that wide. We have a great spectator viewing area right at the finish line. You look kind of straight down the course from the finish line. And I remember when he first, told me about it, like, yeah, could you imagine like if we had a race course here? The first thing I thought about was like Philly. And, being from Philly and racing in Philly in college, it's like, yeah, everybody comes to you, and it's like, it's a really great, fun environment to like welcome people to your home. Throws in a different element for the athletes, where you're not traveling, you're sleeping in your own bed the night before racing. But yeah, I mean, the initial vision was like, how cool would it be to kind of bring rowing here? We've been a little bit isolated, I think, in the past. Like, people don't realize that there is a lot of rowing in Michigan, but you just don't hear about it a lot, both at the junior level and at the collegiate level. I mean, we have us. Michigan's right down the road from us, and then Michigan State's an hour from us. So there's 3, D1 programs, 2 big D1 programs. We've got the University of Toledo is 30 minutes from us south. They're adding a team. That's another D1 team. So there is collegiate rowing in the area. So that was kind of the initial vision, and seeing it start to happen now is just really cool. So we've got Ford Lake Cup that we're hosting, collegiate event at the end of the month. Then this summer, we've got the U.S. Rowing Row Fest coming to Ipsy, which that's going to be really great to welcome not just, collegiate athletes, but juniors, masters, the full gamut of the rowing community. We also have U.S. Rowing Selection Development Camp running out of our boathouse and staying on our campus this summer. So, and those are like U19 athletes that are just below like national team level. And so that's going to be really cool to welcome that group here. We've always known that we have a really great body of water and we have a great setup. But now to be able to like kind of show it to people and have them see kind of what's been going on out here and, make this a place that people are coming to. I think, people go to the Cooper all the time. It's convenient, especially for a lot of East Coast crews, but now we've got something that's a little more convenient for not only East Coast, but Midwest, right? We can kind of all come together here. It's a little shorter travel, even coming from the West Coast. So kind of a central location, but yeah, I mean, it's really, really cool. It's very exciting. The number of calls that Kemp has had from, different schools and programs and governing bodies about like, hey, do you guys have the capacity to host this kind of race? Do you guys have the capacity to do this? And it's like, we do. We have a really big body of water. We have a big park that we can launch trailers from. So it's, yeah. I mean, you should talk to Kemp about it sometime. You could probably do a whole podcast with him, but he has taken it from a vision to an actual thing, which has been really cool to watch. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I think rowing needs that in many ways. Like it needs that, especially speaking from my background, which is men's college rowing. That's, if we think of women's rowing as yes, there's a lot of Northeast programs, East Coast programs, and so on and so forth. Men's rowing is like only really like, besides again, like, you have your single digits on the West Coast, single digits down south and things like that, but it is a very Northeast dominant. And I think providing exposure to the West Coast, or sorry, not West Coast, Midwest, at a course like that is, neutral territory and just going out there and racing, right? Like, I love the Schuylkill, but it has its own things. Seems like every single national championship seems to be at Mercer or the Cooper. Like having stuff out there, neutral territory, that also can shed or provide eyes on all these different platforms within rowing, right? Women's college rowing, high school rowing, juniors rowing, the men's college rowing scene, right? Like having a hub like that you guys are creating out there, I think is a really, really awesome thing that's tied to a university, right? Like, so I think there's a lot of really good advantages to that. And obviously, like you said, right, the big events that you have coming up certainly show the credibility that you guys are kind of providing out there as a race course, as a venue. So with that, let's dive into a little bit of recruiting. I think one of the fun things I want to talk about today, like I've been having constant conversations. I've been talking to a lot of athletes, and one of the things that I think I've been overdue and just having a good kind of chat about the recruiting process and helping athletes navigate that process, and whether they are juniors or sophomores or whatever, right? I've even had freshmen asking about these questions, and I always have my takes on, when is it too early to think about that, and so on and so forth. But I think coming from you, someone who again is someone who is a long time experienced college coach, recruiting coordinator, all these different things, who goes through that on a daily basis, bringing athletes to your school and all that. So one of the things I want to kind of kick things off with is we're sitting here in April, and one of the things that's been coming up to me a lot is the sophomore, kind of athlete who, June 15th, heading into their senior or heading into their junior year, if that's still the day I think it is coming up, and they're trying to figure out, like, where do we even get started in the recruiting process? I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know what schools are out there. I'm still trying to figure out what coaches I need to talk to. All my teammates are saying that they're already, this far ahead. They have this list. They're planning on doing this. Like, just coming from you, right? As someone, again, we'll keep it more on the women's rowing front, and I can kind of tie in a little bit on the men's side as well. But like coming from you, like, and even more so for the parents that are listening too, like, what should these athletes be thinking? Where should they be starting, right? If they are that sophomore in April and they're starting to think about, ooh, I got 2 months to kind of get ready. Am I fast enough? Am I good enough? Where should I be looking? What does that look like? What would you say are those first couple steps in kind of getting into the game of trying to be a college rower someday?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think, getting yourself online, creating a profile on these recruiting sites. I mean, we use NCSA. That's kind of the big one. I know there's some other smaller ones that have been like popping up. But make a profile. Make sure you have a photo on the profile. Make sure you have an updated erg score, even if it's not where you want it to be. Put it on there. Honestly, keep it updated as you progress. Have your contact information on there. Like, fill out as much of the profile as you can right now. Like you mentioned, college coaches aren't going to be able to reach you directly for the next couple of months. So you actually have some time to just kind of build it out and like get it started, and, make sure that it's what you want it to look like come June. You can put your race results in there as you go through the spring, things like that. Questionnaires are always available to fill out. So I know I just keep a folder in my email when I get questionnaires that I can't reach out to yet, but that folder is kind of going to be like June 15th. I'm going to go and kind of take a look in there and see who my first group is going to be that I want to touch base with, who have already filled it out. So you can get ahead that way, fill out some questionnaires. I think different programs probably go through it in similar or different ways to how I'm doing it, but that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm just saving them for June 15th. So those two are kind of like low hanging fruit, right? Like it takes no personal contact. You can fill out 100 questionnaires, right? Like what's the harm in putting a floater out to a reach school, a dream school, right? You might get someone might email you back, even if it's just an email stating like their erg standards. At least then right, on June 15th or mid-June, late June, like, okay, I'm really interested in X school. My erg's not quite where it needs to be for them, but at least I know where it does need to be. And then you can kind of make a reasonable assumption of whether, all right, over the next couple of months, can I get myself to that point? Right. That's kind of probably what I would do initially. You can send an email. I think full transparency, it's a little early. It could really get lost in the shuffle. So if you do send an email, follow up after June 15th. Touch back, especially if it's a place that is going to be on your list and you're very interested in, right? Like it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to reach out. Follow coaches on Instagram, right? Look up the program. You and I talk about this all the time, but like get online. Like, I always take a look at who's followed me and I click on profiles. I look, I see sometimes now athletes are kind of creating like athletic profiles, which is actually pretty helpful. Like if that's something that you want to do, kind of similar to how coaches have been creating coaching profiles, but like you can list your graduation year, your school, your club. And then I've been seeing athletes are posting their erg data on there and they're posting videos of themselves rowing and results. Like that's actually, a cool way to keep coaches updated. So, and I'll follow athletes back. We're allowed to follow you. We just can't talk to you. So that's another way to get on radars. You never know who's going to see your profile. And you might get a DM on June 15th, which I think that's becoming a more normal way to contact athletes and coaches both ways. So, I would just take this time to kind of get prepped. And like you said, like if you're making a list, don't feel like you have to have it all figured out. You can have a long list, you can have a short list. And it'll change. It'll change once you start talking to coaches. So be ready for that. Be ready and open that your initial thoughts on a university might turn out to not be exactly what you thought it was once you do more research into the program. So that's kind of where I would start.
Yeah. And one of the things that came up, right? So that's a lot of like the what to do, right? Like, okay, like, well, you can, create a profile, you can create, whether it's on one of the recruiting databases, which are, pros and cons to those, or you can also create the, an Instagram profile and start posting, your most recent erg updates and some video and stuff like that, right? Like, those are things that you can proactively do to get started. You can start to send some questionnaires and, send some emails knowing that they're probably not going to get a response to, or they actually can't especially if you're a sophomore. So I think those are a couple good things with the what. And my follow-up to that would be like, okay, well, how about from an education standpoint, right? Like when we think about especially women's rowing, you have 100+ schools if you kind of lump all the divisions together, right? Like that support women's varsity rowing, right? Like there's so many of them out there, right? Versus the men's side, which is much more limited, right? It might be like 50 to 60, right? So on the women's side, there's so many options out there geographically across the country. And one of the things that I always do with athletes that I always tell them to do is like, hey, like Instagram to me is one of the best places to start to educate yourself, right? Social media. because that's where you kind of get the personality of the team. If they are someone like a team that invests a lot into social media, we talked about this before in whole other episodes, but like you can kind of get an idea of like, okay, like what's the, level of seriousness of this program? What's the, what kind of races do they do? Do they do a winter training trip? Are the coaches, getting amped up for the day of giving events and things like that? Like you can get a real taste of the personality of the team through social media. And I think that's a huge one. But then the other thing is like, okay, well, how do you educate yourself on, am I good enough? Am I fast enough? And this and that, right? Things that you probably don't necessarily need to worry about too much as a sophomore, right? It's like my biggest advice to sophomores is always the same: to just get better at rowing, and the rest will figure itself out once that summer rolls around. Like, but for your sophomore year, get better at rowing and develop a passion, get as fit as possible, and then you can kind of start to navigate the what's the next phase of your rowing career kind of conversation. But what are some of the things that you think about in terms of educational tools to better equip athletes with, hey, like if I am filling out questionnaires or emailing coaches, do I have a genuine interest in these schools, or am I potentially wasting their time and wasting my time investigating them? Like, where do I actually learn about that? And speak more from the school standpoint, and I think then bridge it into maybe learning a little bit about like, am I actually a competitive candidate for a school like this?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of starting on like the academic side no matter what, because anything can happen as an athlete, right? We don't want to get injured, we don't want to have issues like that, but stuff does happen, right? Injuries pop up, or you have an emergency in your family, or something that comes up that maybe gets in the way of your rowing career. And if rowing is taken away, are you going to enjoy being at the university that you're at? And I think, for you and I, our experience is unique because we both walked on at St. Joe's. So we knew we wanted to be at St. Joe's. So the rowing was a bonus for us. But if you're picking a school solely for the rowing program, you have to consider, well, what if rowing got taken away? And are you going to be far away from home? Are you going to be, in a place academically where maybe you chose a major that you didn't exactly want because they actually didn't offer what you wanted, but you wanted to row there? Like, there are things that are going to probably get in the way somewhere down the line. So I always think like academically first. If you kind of know what you want to study, start looking into schools that offer what you want to study. You don't have to know what you want to study either. I think that's what do you want to study and what's your ERG score are two of my like least favorite pressures that we put on sophomores, like, and even seniors. I mean, when I think of my senior year, junior year, sophomore year, high school self, I did not know what I wanted to do. I barely knew what I wanted to do once I was on campus in college. So, understand also that you have flexibility to change your mind. So, but start looking to see academically what sorts of universities might fit your pursuits. Look geographically. If you know you're not going to do well going far from home, don't look far from home. If you know that you hate the winter, don't look in Boston, Wisconsin, Michigan. And now I'm like sending all these kids away from me. But it's true, right? Like, and if you know you don't like being, sweating your butt off year round, don't go to Florida. So, those things I think are important. And then, so once you kind of get your list of like, all right, these are some places that I think as a person I would do really well. Then you can kind of go and look, all right, well, what do they have to offer on the rowing side of things? Do they have a rowing program? What division is that rowing program? Is it varsity? Is it club? Right? And does that fit with where I feel like I am competitively as an athlete? And now that part is a little harder to determine, right? Unless you know for sure I want to row at the club level. I love rowing, but I'm not here to like throw my entire life at it in college. Or you want to go D3, then that eliminates 100 schools that offer D1 women's rowing, right? But if you're more open to like, I'm not sure which place I might fit at, Then I think you have to do a little more specific research into those teams. Like you said, like get on Instagram, take a look at their team, take a look at their coaches. You can look at race results. You can just go on like the team website, right? Like every school has their main athletics page. Go to rowing. And you can look through like their history, right? And like their historical results and like what they typically do there. What conference are they in? Who do they typically compete with? What's their schedule? Where do they travel to? Um, Things like that. I think that can start to paint a picture for you. You can start to get an idea of like, okay, Texas, Washington, Cal, like we know these are ranked programs, these are big programs. They have big rosters. Right now we're all capped at 68 now, but there's going to be teams that carry the full 68 and there's going to be teams that carry 35. And that's a decision to look at too. Do you want to be in a big pond or a small pond? So that's, I think, the rowing side of it is much more difficult to navigate because, to your point, there's just so many programs. So start academically, and then it's going to take some time on the rowing program side because also you're never really going to know until you start talking to the coaches directly, or visiting campuses. And that's something you're allowed to do at any time. Now, you can't talk to us when you come to campus as a sophomore, but you can go to campus, especially if there's schools in your local area that you're interested in. Go drive through, go check it out. See if it's even like a place that you can really see yourself walking around every day and hanging out. But yeah, the navigating like rowing programs, it's hard. And use your friends too, right? Like teammates, and even your coaches. A lot of your coaches have probably rowed at varying levels or have friends, right? Like you and I are friends. So you can speak to some of the mid-major D1 experience to the kids that you work with. And you also have friends that work, at the Power 5 level. So like use the resources you have around you to kind of paint the picture for you.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think like one of the things that I always say, no, or actually I think the biggest thing to that, and I have another follow-up question to that. It's like on the rowing side of things, it's like, especially if you're a sophomore, right? Like, cause those are the people that we're probably, kind of mostly eyeing up in this particular conversation because they are here in April. They hear all this stuff about summer heading into their junior year. They're starting to get, antsy, and even the parents, I think even more so because they got to kind of plan and figure out their summers. Are they touring these schools or this and that? They have to have everything figured out now? And they start to kind of, it becomes very, very overwhelming. And then also with that, they start to question of like, am I fast enough? Am I good enough? Is this a school that I'm capable of? And like, I think to your point, and this is what I've always said, it's like, hey, like, don't worry about that yet, right? Like, worry about the fact of if I hate cold weather, I probably don't want to go, north of, wherever, right? Like if I am not interested in the West Coast, okay, well, I just, chopped off, a number of schools just by doing that, right? Like there's ways to kind of navigate. And I think like even beyond the academics, it's like geographic, like you said, the academics can be flexible, right? You can kind of figure out like, okay, like what path do I really want to kind of travel, right? Like once you're there, but the geographics, the proximity to a city, I think is a big one that people need to, or should think about, right? Like, do I want urban? Do I want hybrid? Or do I want rural? Right? And there's different variations between that, right? Like there are different benefits and things like that. So those are pieces to consider that all come before, am I good enough to row at this particular university? And the other piece to that is I did an experiment with an athlete a couple days ago, but we were chatting via Zoom and I just pulled up Row 2K results and just went to it. It's like, hey, like if you're looking for schools to start to educate yourself on, because that's really what you should be doing over these next couple months too. It's like, above all, rather than imagining yourself in the seats of one of these boats that are your dream universities, educate yourself on what is actually out there, right? And if you find a school that you are really interested in, and they're up in the Northeast and they have this many students and they are a hybrid where they have, they're 25, 30 minutes from a city where you have easy access. Okay, well, look for schools that are comparable to that school, right? And one of the things I always do is, or one of the things I did with one of the athletes was I took him to Road 2K and we clicked on a random regatta. Now that we're in April, right? We clicked on a random race and we're like, okay, like here's the school that you are interested in. Here's who they're racing, right? You can learn a lot about, okay, like what are the competitive speeds of the varsity eight, second varsity, so on and so forth. And then also like, okay, well, these are all schools that are probably in this, maybe in the same conferences, maybe there's some kind of tie and linkage between all of these schools. Okay, well now I just clicked on this one race to find this one school, and I've just been exposed to another 5 to 10 schools that are comparable in terms of racing, right? They all race at the same events and so on. So there's just different ways to navigate that. But my follow-up question that I think is a really important one is like, when is or when should athletes have it kind of figured to, and again, should is very, very, like again, every athlete's going to be a little bit different, but when should they have it figured out? Meaning, not their decision, but actively communicating with schools they are genuinely interested in, like the coaches and stuff like that, right? Like if they get to June 15th and now it's June 16th and they haven't sent an email, is it all lost? Is it, hey, it's Labor Day weekend and, we're about to go back to school and I still haven't really had a genuine conversation as a junior in, September? Is it all lost? Is it head of the Charles? And I haven't, right? There's an opportunity to go and like I always kind of, me personally, I always say like, hey, like that's kind of a good opportunity to meet coaches and stuff like that, right? Being at the same regatta. But your thoughts on that, right? Like when do they actually have to have it figured out? When is the latest? And even use an example for yourself, like when are you guys really eyeing up most of your recruits in terms of like, hey, like this is what we do, right? Like this is when we think about it. And maybe some schools are, committing, getting juniors to commit, but we're actually a little bit more, summer or stuff like that. What open-ended question? Give your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I don't think there's any one right answer. Like it's hard to put everybody into the same box. To your point, I think every program is a little different timeline wise. Some of your bigger, faster programs are probably going to target juniors pretty quickly after that June 15th date. And kind of like you said, by head of the Charles, if you're someone who is legitimately looking into the top 25 programs in the country, I'd say even top 30 to 35, right? You probably want to start navigating that pretty quickly after June 15th. You want to start having some conversations. You're probably going to get emails. You're going to get some outreach. You probably want to start like getting through that and getting a feel heading into the fall. And there might be visit opportunities in the fall once teams are back on campus. So, that would be kind of the early timeline. Then I think there's a really, really big group of schools. And I would lump us in there because we have a couple, a handful of outliers where we're going to recruit early. But the big portion of our recruiting class, we really start dialing in after head of the Charles. Like it's kind of like we get through all of our official visits in the fall for the class that's ahead of those juniors, the senior class. And then I'm fully switching gears, right? So like I'm spending a little bit of time on juniors leading into the fall, and then I'm fully flipping the switch like after head of the Charles. Like, okay, next group. Like I've kind of figured out, we have our commits and our visits are over and all of that. So, but then it's kind of a wide open door, right? Basically up until the end of your senior year. And that's where you have to stay like patient to yourself and your own process, because you're going to start seeing on Instagram and all this like, oh, so-and-so committed. They're committed. They're verbally committed. Okay. Right? Like just because you're not verbally committed by the end of your junior year doesn't mean that it's over. There are a lot of programs that still have spots available, that still have scholarship available. And that's where you have to be diligent to know really what you want, because there's probably a reason why these programs that are getting the early commits didn't reach out to you or didn't offer you yet. Okay. And it doesn't mean anything bad about you. It just means like, okay, I actually might not have fit in with what that program's looking for. So can I pivot and try to find a program that matches more with like my values and goals for myself? Right. And then you have athletes who trickle into the sport during their junior and senior year. those athletes still get recruited. So you have to remind yourself of that as well. Like if you're an athlete who started rowing in middle school or started rowing in ninth grade, and you feel like it's over because you haven't talked to enough coaches by head of the trials of your junior year, just remember you're going to have teammates probably who join you that next spring or that next fall late, who will go on to row in college. So like you don't want to hit the panic button, but do understand that if you're on that like top end speed wise, like you're going to have to navigate some conversations earlier. But I think the door is really wide open from June 15th for the majority of programs in the country, from June 15th heading into your junior year through, spring of your senior year. I mean, we signed our whole class in November. We've been done with the senior class since the fall, but I know athletes who are still committing right now. Like I was just in the launch with one of the Michigan State coaches this past weekend, and she was telling me they just got a big commit that they were waiting for like this past week, and it's April. So, even at a bigger program like that, it's still happening. So, and if it's a place you really want to go, keep advocating for yourself, keep talking to those coaches, until they absolutely tell you, no, we don't have, anything to offer you. So.
And I love one of my favorite things with like I love like obviously with what I do and talking with athletes, talking with coaches, or talking with athletes and parents and helping them navigate this process. One of my roles, one of my responsibilities I feel like I need to do is help kind of shed some light on the fact that like kind of bringing reality to them where it's like you don't need to hit that panic button. Like you have more time than you think, right? Like you and a lot of people, again, they see it on social media. Their friends are flexing that they went to, this event or talk to this coach or now wearing the swag of this team. And it sends the athletes into this, crazy storm of like, hey, I need to do this or I need to do that. And parents, I think even more so because they're not kind of in the boathouse hearing those conversations and this and that. It's whispered down the lane. They're only hearing it from, their athletes or other parents or their kids and other parents. And one of the things that I always say, or one of the things I always love to bring up to people is like, because I know countless athletes who were in that kind of panic storm in June, July, and August heading into their junior year. And they didn't even commit to whatever school that they ended up at until June, July, or August of the following year, right? So it's just a real life example. And this is actually in many ways a lot of the athletes, if not the majority, where it's like, you're talking about you're now kind of not purposefully, but you're stressing yourself out for 12 months for something that is ultimately going to materialize, way later than you think, right? There's a couple of those athletes who commit as juniors because they're A-level athletes on every roster in America, right? Like, but the majority of them, it's a longer process than they might otherwise think. So it's like, take your time, do your due diligence, have fun with it, right? You don't need to be in a stressful state for 12 months. For the first couple months of it, for the first 4 months, just go tour campuses, email coaches, get some tours at a boathouse, look at race results, follow them on Instagram, right? Send them some update emails. Hey, I'm doing this, this, and this. But you don't have to have it all figured out until, like you said, you're really turning your attention, to those athletes come head of the Charles time. It's kind of when you're flipping the switch. And then even then you're talking about a few months after that before it probably becomes real genuine, kind of meaningful communication. So I think that's just something for a lot of the athletes out there where it's like, hey, like, don't be afraid to take a step backwards and be like, hey, like, I got more time than I think. Let me kind of navigate this process and actually make meaningful engagements with coaches and actually trying to communicate with them and all these different things. And with that, my follow-up, I think it's great. I'd love to hear from you because I think you'll put a great, kind of your thoughts on my next question. But let's talk about what are coaches looking for, right? And in many ways, we're going to turn this into a whole recruiting conversation, but I'm okay with that. That's fun stuff to talk about. But what are coaches actually looking for athletes? And meaning for you as a Division I coach recruiting athletes in high school. And I think we're going to go a couple directions with this question. But I think first, if you can you shed some light on 2Ks? Right? And erg metrics, right? Whether that's 2K or 5K and kind of your thought process behind, okay, like here's what I'm looking for. Here's what's competitive to me. Here's what I may feel is competitive to other programs out there, kind of like the thresholds that we need to hit, right? To kind of be in a competitive area, for this to actually kind of be a really good value add to our resume. And then the second layer to that, and we'll kind of treat it separately, is what are other things that coaches are looking for. But let's start with the big one that I'm sure every parent is thinking about, every athlete is thinking about: erg performances, erg results, training, stuff like that. Like the raw numbers that we are asked to provide these coaches, to kind of get our foot in the door. Like, give your honest assessment in terms of like, what are you looking for that kind of speaks to a competitive athlete? What's an A versus a C? And again, not speaking Eastern Michigan specifically, you can if you want, but your general assumption on the landscape of competitive Division I rowing, not grand finalist Division I rowing, but just competitive, right? Teams that take it seriously and want to compete.
Yeah. This is a good bridge because one last thing I wanted to mention on the previous question is we're a training sport. We're an endurance sport. So the other thing is if you feel like on June 15th, your erg isn't recruitable, okay, you are a sophomore, you have 2 more years of training. And if you are diligent and you train well for 2 years, there's no way you don't get faster. So, and good college coaches know that and like understand what to look for there, So that's something else to keep in mind. Like, we understand this is a training sport. Training takes time. Results lag on training. And like, we know that. So don't be discouraged on June 15th if you feel that, you get an email back from a program and they say, hey, we're looking under 7:30 and you're 7:45. Okay, you could be 7:30 in 6 months, So, and I'll bridge that now into
I love that. That's
what you just asked me.
That's a great point, because in many ways you shouldn't be discouraged by it, because you do have 2 years. It's like
100%. Like,
use the motivation.
And if you show progress over those 2 years, I mean, you can let me know what college coach in the country isn't interested in someone who goes 7:10, late in their junior year, early senior year. I think that a team's going to find a spot for you, even if you think that you're behind the curve. So don't be discouraged. It's in some ways unrealistic of us as a sport to think that you would be fully developed by June 15th of your sophomore year. Right?
Yeah.
So we're different from basketball, soccer, field sports where you've been honing your skill set now for 10 years, right? Before you get recruited. Very different from that. So keep that in mind. The erg score, though, the thing about the erg is that it's the easiest way for us to measure where someone's fitness is at, that can correlate pretty directly to what we're doing on the water. We know there's a certain range that we have to be in order to compete at the level that we want to compete at on the water. And there's all other factors that go into our water speed. There's technique and lineups and all of that. But at baseline, there is a certain level of fitness that's necessary, depending on what program you're going to be competitive at the level that program wants to compete at. And so there's a full gamut. Like, I think for a while we used the 8-minute mark in women's rowing as a benchmark. And I think it's still a reasonable benchmark at the high school level as you're getting into the sport. I think that it has become less of a benchmark at the college level. We as a program have been really moving away from it, as like we have to kind of stop treating 8 minutes like this big hurdle to get over. Because just historically looking at on the water results, teams that are going around that 8-minute mark, the results on the water are pretty insignificant most of the time, unless you're a lightweight program. Like, there could be maybe some argument there for that. But even then, I think that our top lightweight women's programs in the country are well under that mark. I kind of have been starting to shift it in my mind to 7:45, just based off of watching athletes come into our training program. And again, we're a mid-major. We're competing somewhere in the middle to top half of our mid-major conference. So for athletes that are listening, keep that in mind as I say this. This does not account for the top 25 programs in the country, probably, but it might in some ways. I have found like that benchmark brings athletes in at a fitness level that is able to adapt to our training level better than an athlete who is slower than that. And it doesn't mean that if you're slower than that, you can't adapt. That's not what I'm saying. But we see a better correlation with being able to pick up the load and the volume of what we do at that kind of fitness level. And I would imagine as you go to faster programs, that number comes down 740, 735, right? 730, depending where you're going. And again, takes time. So,
And is that just to clarify, is that would you say that's like walking in the door speed freshman year, or is that something like, hey, like senior year, junior year, we want to see you here? Like what is 745 to you? Again, I'm sure it varies based on the other underlying factors of the story of the athlete, but like what does 745 kind of mean to you, and when does that threshold in your eyes, like, and I love the way that you said it, where it's like, this doesn't mean that you won't be successful if you are 755, 805, whatever. It just means that to adapt to the training load that we place on you as a Division I athlete, like this is where we feel like you can be successful and hopefully be a contributor to our team. I think if that kind of summarizes a little bit, but
exactly.
But in your eyes, when does that 745, like when is that kind of like materialize? Like what does that need to look like?
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right with there's also other storylines that are at play, and we take that into account as well. So there's the 745 that happens, your junior year, you've been rowing since maybe 8th or ninth grade. Your 745 your junior year. And maybe we're talking like spring of your junior year, right? And then you head into your senior year, and you probably shave off a little bit more time going into your senior year. There's that scenario. And I think that's a really solid place to be. There's also the scenario of, I just started rowing, my junior year, and I'm 745 at the end of my senior year. Right. I kind of think of it as like, how long have you been in the sport? Right. I think like that 3-year benchmark, like your junior year, if you've been rowing since your freshman year, 745 should be pretty achievable with a decent training program by your junior year, I think. There's all other factors that are going to go into it, right? Are you a multi-sport athlete? Okay. Maybe you don't train on the erg in the winter. Maybe you play basketball. And coaches are going to take that into account. I certainly do. And so that might delay progress a little bit. Getting into the sport a little bit later, all kinds of things, right? So I hate to like put a box on it, right? Like I that's just my personal opinion. Like, 3 years at the high school level, because your first year you're learning, right? It's kind of a wash. You're not really training yet. That first year you're learning. And you get into your sophomore year, and now you know enough, and your technical ability is such that you can start training, right? And like we're talking about, like kids are going through physical development just as a person in high school. So you're going through all of that too during this time, right? Like there are kids that are 5 foot their freshman year and 5'7" their senior year, so all of that stuff is like playing into how quickly someone may or may not develop. So I'm careful to put a box on that. But I think if I had to guess, somewhere around that junior year, depending on your storyline. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think again, like I love, because you're not the first coach who I've talked to who kind of outlines it that in the sense of like, hey, like this is what we feel is going to make you competitive, or not even competitive. adapt to the training that we do, right? Like we're training your high school program, you're probably 6 days a week, some on the water, maybe some on the erg, maybe some circuits and stuff like that. Like you're probably not used to a 10 session per week, 20K, daily kind of high intense, program like that. So it's to help you adapt to that work. What's to kind of put a nail into the erg competition or the erg piece? What's like in your eyes a competitive threshold in terms of like, if you're at this level as a junior, you're at this level as a senior, kind of in the fall of your senior year, like what does that threshold look like? What's something where it's like, oh, this is probably like, this is an athlete where when I see like they're at this competitive speed, this is something that most coaches are really going to light up for. Because I think one of the things is a lot of coaches don't offer clarity on things. They just say, oh, we're going to look for athletes under 730, right? Like, what does that mean? Right? Like,
Yeah.
what does that actually mean? And are you just providing more confusion to the athlete? Right? Does that mean all your athletes are under 730? Does that mean that to get your foot in the door, you're under 730? Does that mean you got to be here, here, here? Like, in your eyes, like, what is kind of like that range that you're typically looking for? You kind of have 745 as kind of like the floor, but like where are you seeing a lot of the starting out ceiling that it's like, hey, like that's an athlete who I know is going to be really successful at this level walking in, not the A of the A, but like competitive.
I think like that 735 and below range, like the athletes that we've had who have come in around there, they're able to really jump in and not just like adapt to the training, but actually impact the training positively, right? And like add to what we're doing in a very competitive way. And I think to your point about walking in the door speed and where you're at right now versus where you're at right now, I've like been kind of wrapping my head around lately with recruiting. I'm looking at kind of where our current team is at, right? And looking at athletes and saying, okay, they're a junior, they're a 745. If they train well, they should be sub 740 their senior year, which brings them walking in the door somewhere around there, right? Like you might walk in the door a little slower than your PR, right? Within reason, okay. Walking in the door, where does that put them on our team? And to be honest, I like to see walking in the door speed putting you somewhere in the middle at the minimum. Just because I know if your walking in the door speed is putting you at like the tail end, it's going to be a really long climb. If you know you're coming in and you're going to be on the tail end and you understand what the work level is going to be, then that's totally fine too. But it's kind of understanding like your expectations of what's going to happen when you step foot in here and our expectations. Like we have athletes that we recruit with the intention of this person. We want this person to impact one of our top 2/8 their freshman year. Like we are looking to fill a seat of someone who's graduating, right, in one of those 2/8. And if that's the case, if you're someone that we're looking to for that, we kind of need to see you walk in the door around that speed, right? I don't know, I've become a lot more, I don't want to say blunt, but a lot more just like, this is just what the speed is. There's just no reason to beat around the bush, right? If you want to do the work to get to it, then let's do it. But if it feels like something that you don't want to work for, then you might have to find a program where the level comes to you.
And they're out there too, which is that's the thing about women's rowing, right? Like there's so many good options out there where it's like, hey, like if you want to compete, if you want to work hard, if you want to kind of see how far you can take, this platform, this ride that you're embarking on, at the college level, like then go to one of those schools that again they're gonna push, they're gonna bring you, they're gonna push you, to your max capacity in different ways, in a good way, right?
Yep.
And if maybe you're not at that level or competitiveness wise, like there are other options out there, right? There are options that are looking for the, I've known athletes who are 810 to 755 who are, signing letters and getting recruited and this and that. So again, like
Yeah.
I like transparency with coaches, and I think that them outlining that a little bit more like would be amazing for the athletes, because it just tells them like, hey, like you want to come here and actually have a really competitive or really be in a position to make some noise right from the jump. Like this is the best benchmark that we have, and this is the one that I think you should shoot for.
Yep.
And telling them that, right? I think this is an
Yep.
important piece. Last piece, Lane, because I know you got to run. I know you guys got a busy spring season coming, but just quick, 2-minute dive in. What else besides just the erg, right? We just spent a good time, give some good information on the erg, but what else are you looking for, and things that coaches can really or athletes can really benefit from knowing, that build out that athlete resume, athlete wise, right? We'll keep the academics for another podcast, but the athlete wise.
Yeah. Number one for me is you have to love the sport. And when I say love the sport, it's really, you have to love the training, because that's 90% of what we do. And when I say like love, the way I know an athlete loves training is when you ask them, all it takes is, hey, how's training going? And they just go, right? And they're on like the rabbit hole of how training is going. And they're telling you all about the workouts they did this week, how it went, what they want to get better at, what they're looking forward to, in the next day's session, where they were a month ago versus where they are now. I know you love it because it's easy to talk about stuff that you love. When I ask an athlete how training is going and I get, it's good. Well, what'd you guys do today? Oh, we did 4 by 10 minutes. Well, how'd it go? If I have to really like pull the information out of you, it probably tells me you don't love it right now. You might love it in the future. I'm not going to totally write you off. It doesn't mean that you can't, gain a love for it. But if there's an athlete listening to this, know that you can't fake loving it. Like, I think the coaches that love it will know. Like, you probably know. That's why you and I love chatting, because we love training. And like, you just know when you talk to someone who loves training, because you can just go on it. So that's my number one, because that's 90% of what we do. There's good days, there's bad days. There's days like today where it's freezing and you got to come erg and you got to love it. So, and we're lucky we have a team of a lot of people that are like that. So if you're like that, this could be a place. But then second to that for me is like, what kind of teammate are you? And what kind of leader are you? And I don't want people to think that they have to be a captain of their team to be considered a leader. I think there's also leading by following, right? Like every leader kind of needs like that first follower. Otherwise, like you're not leading anybody but yourself. So you do need people who kind of back up whoever that, like the vocal person who's kind of at the front of the pack. Who's lining up with that person and saying, yeah, she's right. Like, let's go. If she wants to go do extra meters, I'm going with her and you should come too. Like that is just equally as important. And I think you can tell a lot about like teammates just going and watching practices. One of our basketball coaches told me this once and I loved it. I stole it from her as like a line, but like it's the moments between the moments. What is that athlete doing in between pieces? Are they fist bumping the teammates next to them who had a great piece? Are they walking around the room chatting? Or are they kind of like off to themselves, kind of looking angry or, upset? That stuff really does matter. Even on the water, like how do you interact with the people around you? Especially I think when things are not going well, like when you can tell a boat's kind of struggling, like how do you react to that scenario? And so I want the people that are reacting in a constructive way, trying to like build their teammates up, trying to fix the problem if there is a problem. And it's not like about being like overly positive if something's not going well. I'm not really looking for that either. Like I don't need someone like, yeah, we got this. Like it's more like, hey, I think that piece could have been a little better if, we lengthen out another beat on the rate? Why don't we all try, lengthening out together on this next one or whatever? Being constructive, I think, is important. But yeah, like, love it. Be a great teammate. Those are my top two. And then, I think every program can go down the line of things that they're looking for. But I think without those two things, it's hard to go where we want to go, which is like, we want to win a championship. We want to go to NCAAs. And I think you need people like that. So.
I love it. Delaney, I know you got, I think you said guys got a team lift today. So I'll make sure you get off to that.
Yep.
Athletes who love training. But no, this was a blast. And obviously we'll probably have you back on, sooner rather than later. Cause again, and we'll dive into maybe specifically training on that next one, since today was mostly recruiting. But I think it was a good one, where it's something that's very high up on athletes and parents' mind, right? The recruiting front and what to do and getting some real information from coaches. So with that, thank you so much for coming on as usual. Any last things for us? Any last updates or any, obviously you're on Instagram, you have emails and stuff like that, but wrap us up if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, good luck to everybody getting out there this spring. Go fast, have fun racing, and, hopefully we'll see some of you out here at RowFest this summer. Yeah, excited to maybe, welcome some new faces to Eastern Michigan. So, yeah.
Sweet. We'll get you on before then. That's for sure. All right, everyone. Delaney, McGuire, thank you so much. Good luck as you guys kick off or continue throughout the season and make the most of this break that you have before your next big race. And you and I will certainly be talking soon. All right. Thanks, Delaney.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin.